How do I evolve past sales calls, discovery calls, consultations, strategy sessions, whatever you're calling them? When you have a block on your calendar that's carved out so that you can meet somebody to put them into your program, your online program, that means that you don't have time freedom, right? You have a calendar obligation. And this is a little bit advanced, but I'm going to cover this topic in a way that should apply to everybody, no matter where you are in your development. There's going to be different themes and things you can start to look at as you get more clarity around your next steps and kind of where you're growing next. The thing about time freedom is that not everybody wants it. For some people it freaks them out. But you can have time freedom and you can still keep your brick and mortar. You can schedule yourself. You can do all these things, but it becomes an option. It becomes an active decision, not just a default thing that you feel like you have to do. I know it seems kind of braggy, but this is what time freedom looks like. It's a Wednesday morning. I'm doing whatever I want. I'm making a video. I'm out in the sunshine on my own time. I woke up this morning, had tea, got talking with my wife for a couple hours, and we're just hanging out, and now I'm going to make my video while she does a little bit of homeschool stuff with the kids. I'll come back, and it's all on my schedule. I want you to have this level of freedom. You shouldn't have to be a slave to your calendar unless there's just things you don't know, right? And that's kind of where we're at here is I want to share with you some of the thoughts here. And it's not just like I'm some wizard and only I can do this stuff. I'm getting whispers that recently one of our annual members has put all this into place, and there's been a year's worth of income within a month happening. So this stuff is not just me, right? You can replicate it. You can learn how to do these things. And a lot of what we do goes totally against conventional wisdom for any kind of marketing, sales, anything like that. And I'm just here to tell you that that's the old way, the old model. And for some of you, you haven't even gotten into the old model yet. We can skip that step should you choose. So what happens with sales calls? Why are they necessary? Well, for most people, when they're creating an online like coaching program or something like that, you have a higher ticket price, and so you have to justify that, right? You have to make sure that the people who are coming into your world understand the value of what it is you do. And the sales call, one of the things that happens on that call is it's a way for you to actually explain what it is you do and help them make a decision if they want to move forward or not. It's a little bit higher touch, right? People don't usually just buy a $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 program just off a landing page, right? You see an ad on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and you go to a landing page and it's like, hey, oh yeah, we solve your problem. We do it great. Here's some testimonials. Sign up now, 10K. It doesn't usually work that way. You need to build a relationship around these higher ticket offers. And so the de facto kind of standard for the industry is to have sales calls. Now, for Eastern medicine and other medical practices that are more alternative, we've borrowed a lot of business models from different industries, and this can become a training glitch. Like, for example, with acupuncture, we kind of borrowed the practice model of massage therapy and Western psychiatry and psychology, right? It's like a 1-hour appointment. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of touch. People take naps, right? I mean, it's like this kind of thing where we borrowed this business model and this structure that doesn't necessarily have to be there. It can work, of course, but if you don't like something about that, maybe you want to see more than one patient an hour. Maybe you don't want to talk to people all the time about, what happened when they were a kid and everything. You really just want them to get the needles in. You can restructure your practice model according to something that makes more sense for the type of work you want to do. Now, it's the same thing when we go to online. A lot of the online stuff for health is built on kind of these the coaching models, and it's a really cool place to look, right? High ticket consulting, high ticket coaching, but typically that model is something like do something to get some attention, right? Like Facebook ads or whatever, and then draw people to your landing page where they can see your VSL, your video sales letter, or your webinar, or there's some other mechanism, like they download your ebook or whatever it is, where they're getting your secrets through this process of submitting their email address and their contact info, and then they get to watch basically your sales presentation. And then the goal from that is to get them to watch that video or read your book or whatever, and then they book a call with you to learn more about your high ticket consulting. There are variations on this. I'm not going to get into all of them here, of course, but that's the general gist of it. And then the people who don't book the call go on your email list, and you just keep blasting them with emails until they either unsubscribe or they also book a call. And then from there, you're trying to sign people up on the phone into your group coaching program or whatever. This can work. There are downsides, which is that you're still anchored to a calendar, right? If somebody has access to your schedule to book their calls, then you've got to fucking chop to it when they say, so there goes your time freedom. You can mark off days off. You can do all these things. you can, I mean, ultimately, like when you're selling time, you can always sell other people's time. And this is where you hire sales closers and people like that. And that brings a whole other kind of complexity into this arrangement. It just does. Because those people are now incentivized based on commissions and things like that. And they'll start chucking out your, like typically you'll have an application or some kind of survey to pre-qualify your leads. So the sales people, usually sales guys, they'll just chuck out the ones that they don't think are going to be a good fit, so they're not wasting their time, even though they may be tossing out people that would have been a great fit. They don't have the discretion of that. There's a lot of issues with that. So it can be done, right? What I've found, again, the best way to, I know I say this a lot, the best way to optimize a variable is to eliminate the need for it. Now, this comes from a saying in physics and engineering where it's like the best way to optimize a variable is to eliminate it, or the biggest mistake an engineer can make is optimizing something that shouldn't exist in the first place, right? This is like a different industry, right? But we can take this same kind of wisdom, and I say in the human body it works the same way too. Like the best way to heal a symptom, right? The best way to optimize that variable is to eliminate the need for it, right? Like symptoms are compensatory mechanisms. The body creates things like night sweats or fatigue or whatever, some way to compensate for the situation going on. So if we can change the internal conditions, the body doesn't need to create those symptoms. The symptoms don't need to emerge, and they just go away naturally because they stop being created. It's the same thing with problems in our practice, right? So like sales calls are a variable. You can optimize that, of course. The better thing to do is to not just cut them off. You can't just cut it off because there's still a need there, right? You still have to like check a lot of boxes in terms of being able to connect with people, and there's a whole process that happens on these calls when you get good at this stuff. There's a lot of things that happen in a relatively condensed amount of time. And what I've done here is presented a way where you can get all those things accomplished and more without the need for the call. And you can get into the fractal systems, you can start to implement this stuff, put it in place, and get it around your business, and it will change your existence dramatically. It will. The first time somebody sends you thousands of dollars and you've never talked to them on a call, you'll realize that, holy fuck, this is real, and everything, all the conventional coaching, consulting, marketing, sales training, and all that stuff, they just don't know these things. And I know this is kind of like a bold thing to say, but honestly, I've set out to make the best business training possible out there. I just happen to be aiming it for health practitioners, right? So it's like, I want world-class training in my program, and I do believe we have it, and we're just niched into health practitioners, right? So this isn't the watered-down version for, hey, go get them, doc. Let's get you online, doc. It's not that stuff. It's here's how to orchestrate and create a world around your work that has systems and processes that allow you to inject more humanity over top, right? Just like your skeleton has bones, and then we can have our own flesh and our skin and our facial expressions and all that. You got to have the right bones. So building the fractal systems gives you bones, and then you can be yourself on top of that, which is, I think, really cool. It's very, very liberating, and you don't have the trade-offs. So having these systems that prevent the need for the calls in the first place is the way to get rid of them. You can't just trash them. It's very hard to just like trial and error this. It's very expensive, and it takes a long time to just start tinkering with things. It's much better to take a proven system where the different pieces interlock, all the way from like how you're attracting people, what you're doing with your group, the timing, the pacing, like what's your vault look like, all these things, your offer construction, your demo, like there's so many moving parts, as well as how you show up and what you understand behind the scenes and between the lines. That's all the stuff that you learn in the program, right? I mean, I can't explain all this in a vault post or a damn good questions, right? So you got to have this kind of training, because then you show up differently and you just know what's happening. Just like you have training on physiology, you show up differently to somebody's body or their health problems because you've got an understanding between the lines of what's happening. You can interact with the system in a different way. So one of the things to consider here is when you're evolving up from not doing calls, it's no different than anything else. You're doing what you're doing right now because it's working up to a point. Maybe it's like the best you knew, or you copied it from another model, or whatever it is. Like it's working-ish, right? But we're looking at making things better. So you need to be ready to outgrow that if that's something you want to do. You don't have to. Some people will use sales calls. Like I recommend doing this actually when you're just getting started, to do some calls and build up kind of like a beta version of your program. We've talked about this at summits. It's in our program here of like how to kind of do this so you can baby step your way from not having an online thing to having an online thing that's got calls in it to then graduating out of that. Like, you may want to have a time where you're taking calls. It can be very important. It can be very helpful. You can learn a lot from that, and you can start to build something that way. But you need to be able to outgrow that should you choose. Otherwise, you're going to be trapped by it. The thing you build, the fancy thing, will become a cage, right? And I've been stuck in that cage, and I know what it's like. And it's really weird because you're winning, right? It's working, but it's like, at what cost? Now instead of seeing people face to face, sure, I can travel around and stuff, but I'm still tied to this calendar, right? So it can be a little haunting when you start to look and go, is this it, right? So we can get to a place where you've got a whole different baseline of time freedom. Now, one of the ways to do this is to recognize that whatever you're doing currently is meeting your needs in some way, right? There's some kind of symbiotic relationship to this. So, if you're not even online or whatever, I'll use a different example, which is insurance, right? People are trying to get their practices out of insurance. Okay, I want to get out of the insurance model. Well, you've got to ask yourself, why are you in it in the first place? What needs is that meeting for you? Right? Is it just the best you knew? Is it you copied it from some other person? Like, what's going on here? Because you can't just stop taking insurance overnight without having everything built up in the background to accommodate this change. So we have different components of our business. We've got the attraction part, conversion, the sales piece. We have our product or our program, right? Those four. It's very helpful to start to outline those. I'm getting a breeze. This is great. Most likely, if you're taking insurance, that's offsetting complexity and skill gaps from some of those different areas or all, right? So for example, I know I talk about this a lot, but with insurance, if you're not good at attracting new patients, but you're on an insurance panel, then that's helping to solve some of your skill gaps and your deficiencies there, because people just call their insurance and go, I need to find a provider near me that you cover, right? So you've handled attraction in some way. The downside of that, the trade-off, is that now you're getting people who are coming in just because you're cheap for their insurance, right? So you're not necessarily having systems that filter for the best long-term relationships, but you can get cash coming in, right? And you can help people that way too. So it's not bad, but it's looking at that across everything, like your conversion, your consultation, I'm not good at sales, I'm not good at treatment plans. You don't have to be if you're taking insurance, because the patient looks at their insurance and it says covers up to 20 visits per year, and the patient goes, okay, I guess I'm coming 20 times this year, I want to get the most out of my insurance. You didn't create a treatment plan that has anything to do with the reality of that person's case, right? But that complexity is handled for you. That's off your back because the insurance took care of it. Whether it's right or wrong, who knows? But it's handled. You don't have to think about that. It's easier, right? You can breathe out, and you can kind of reduce down to something else that's more manageable in terms of where your bandwidth and your skills are. Like, maybe you really, really, really like doing treatments, and you don't really like doing treatment plans or attracting people. Then keeping insurance on is fine, right? But at some point, the downsides start to pile up and the resentment builds. You go, okay, I need to outgrow the system. Well, just remember, your past self agreed to that for a symbiotic reason. Have you evolved out of that past self enough in terms of your skill gaps and everything else that's going on with you so that you don't need that relationship anymore? Because you don't want to leave yourself high and dry, right? Now, it's the same thing with the sales calls. Like, a past version of yourself may have subscribe to that model and going, okay, this is great, I can do it, but now you're starting to outgrow it, right? So the way, again, to outgrow it gracefully is to put proper systems in place across the board. The way you attract people, the way you do your conversion, the way you do your sales, right? Obviously, if you're not going to have the call, how are we going to do that? And then also the product delivery. If you're not doing consultations, follow-ups, all these things, how are you making sure that people are getting better, that they're tracking their progress, that they have ways to get their questions answered? All these things and more have already been pre-solved. I'm doing it, and I'm sure not the only one who's doing it. And they're pre-solved in a way where the solutions we come up with don't create more problems down the line. Because that's what also can happen. It's okay, I want to get rid of calls, so I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z thing, and now that actually just creates more complexity, and there's a complexity debt piling up where you've got to now handle that, and it's these ripples, right? Everything's just getting worse. We go the other way. It's really something. So the short of it is, for one, don't let anybody tell you that you have to have sales calls for high ticket, because you don't. I've proven it, right? But you can't just recklessly do that. I wouldn't recommend winging it. Having all the systems set up in place to create the conditions where you don't need the calls, that's the way to do it. Just like somebody with a lot of symptoms, you need to work on their systems, their body systems, right? We need to work on our business systems and get a healthier functioning business that doesn't require our time tied to a calendar as an input to keep it functioning. And it totally can be done, and that's the way to do it. And I'm also going to say that there's a lot in the vault on this that should get you thinking that's just free. And we also have a great depth in our program. If you want to get very practical, technical, what's the software? How does this piece interact with that piece? And again, the software shouldn't be overwhelming either. I keep that super lean. We don't want software problems, right? We want it lean and tidy and easy to work with. But you got to know what you're doing when you're building this thing, and you want to build it right so that it's future-proofed. And there's a lot to be said for your starting conditions, how you set up your group, what you're doing for attraction, why, when, how you've got everything timed out, what's your offer, what are the conditions and terms around the offer, how does the demo work? Like, there's so much architecture under the scenes, and I'm very, very excited for those of you that are prepared to dive in. You're going to come out the other side just a whole different person. All right, get to work.